For centuries, the Louvre in Paris has stood as one of the most secure and revered museums on Earth, a place that feels untouchable, like a fortress of culture that no ordinary criminal could ever hope to breach. Millions of visitors walk through its grand halls each year, moving beneath painted ceilings and past guarded display cases, believing that everything inside those walls is completely protected. But on the morning of October 19th, 2025, that belief was shattered. It began quietly, with no drama, no gunfire, no cinematic alarms. Just after 9:30 in the morning, as tourists were lining up under the glass pyramid and museum staff were starting their workday like any other, a small truck pulled up alongside the museum near the wing facing the Seine River. On the back of that truck was a vertical furniture lift, the kind commonly used in Paris apartment moves to transport heavy items up the sides of buildings. And riding with it were 4 men in high-visibility construction vests, hard hats, gloves, backpacks, radios, everything you'd expect workers to have. It didn't look like the beginning of a major crime. It looked like routine maintenance. 2 of the men climbed onto the lift platform, while the others remained on the ground, watching their surroundings and keeping in constant communication. Slowly, mechanically, the basket began to rise. It wasn't fast. It wasn't theatrical. It just calmly lifted up toward a balcony on the 2nd floor, the balcony that leads into the Galerie d'Apollon. Inside that gallery, behind polished glass and under carefully positioned museum lighting, rested some of France's most treasured crown jewels and ceremonial royal pieces. Tiaras, necklaces, gem-studded headpieces, symbols once worn by queens and empresses, sparkling reminders of centuries of power and history. To visitors, they were priceless cultural artifacts. To the thieves, they were a very specific target. When the lift reached the balcony, the men went to work with precision. They broke into the window using cutting tools powerful enough to get through protective glass, but portable enough to carry. The moment the glass shattered, the clock started ticking. Security sensors did register activity, but that didn't mean guards immediately knew what was happening or where. It takes time to track the right camera feed. It takes time to understand whether something is a technical error or a genuine breach. Those seconds mattered. Inside the gallery, surrounded by gold, history, and silence, the thieves wasted none of them. They approached the display cases like people who already knew exactly what they wanted. Power tools screamed for only a few moments at a time as the hardened glass was attacked, fractured, and finally broken open. Then hands moved quickly. Velvet mounts were torn free. Boxes, cloths, and protective foam were pushed aside as item after item disappeared into bags. They didn't take everything. They took what they believed could be moved, sold, or broken down. Among the pieces stolen were extraordinary historical jewels from the 19th century imperial era, including emerald-studded royal jewelry and sapphire collections associated with members of the former French imperial family. Some of these items had been admired by generations. Some had survived wars, revolutions, and political upheaval. And now, they were gone in minutes. But the escape wasn't perfect. In the rush, one of the most significant artifacts, an ornate crown belonging to Empress Eugénie, slipped from their possession. It was dropped and damaged, later found outside. It was a rare sign of chaos in an otherwise incredibly controlled operation. Meanwhile, the group withdrew as efficiently as they had entered. The men inside returned to the lift, descended back toward the ground, while their partners secured the perimeter and checked their surroundings. When they landed, the next phase of the operation began just as calmly as the first. They didn't use a high-speed getaway car. They didn't vanish into a van. They got onto motor scooters. Scooters allowed them to do something cars rarely can: slide into traffic, disappear between vehicles, and become invisible in a city where thousands of riders are doing the same thing every single day. Within minutes, Paris swallowed them. By the time security truly understood what had happened, and authorities converged on the right section of the building, the thieves were gone. Inside the gallery remained silence, shattered glass, and empty mounts where history had once rested. The aftermath unfolded quickly. Police launched a massive investigation. Airports were watched. Borders were alerted. Multiple suspects were eventually identified, and some individuals connected to the operation were arrested or questioned. There were reports of DNA traces found on equipment, gloves, and helmets. There were phones, communications, movements tracked and reconstructed. But even with suspects detained, the jewels didn't return. Officials warned early on that if the stolen pieces were broken apart, stones removed, metals melted, or items moved into private underground markets, they might never resurface again. These weren't just expensive objects. They were irreplaceable cultural heritage, fragments of the country's royal past, embedded with identity and meaning. The emotional impact on France was immediate. This wasn't viewed as just theft. It was described as an attack on heritage, on history, on collective memory. But beyond outrage, something else emerged: embarrassment. Investigations revealed weaknesses, blind security spots, surveillance areas without full coverage, delays in real-time response, and the entrance point, that balcony window, was far less secure than many assumed. Critics asked, how could this happen in the Louvre? How could one of the world's most protected museums be breached by something as unremarkable as a lift, some tools, and high-visibility clothing? Museum workers themselves spoke out. Some claimed chronic understaffing and long-ignored safety concerns. Others argued that, while the Louvre is spectacular, it is also enormous, a sprawling historic palace whose sheer size makes perfect protection extremely difficult. Strikes, criticism, policy debates, and political pressure followed. Reinforcements were ordered. Metal security bars were installed on exposed access points. Additional cameras were added. Procedures were reassessed. But nothing could undo what had happened. And yet, people kept coming. Visitors still arrived from every part of the world. They still lined up, waited patiently, entered the great halls, and stood before art that outlived rulers, revolutions, and time itself. Because the truth is this: people don't come to the Louvre for reassurance. They come for connection, to look at something that existed long before them and will, hopefully, exist long after. The theft of the crown jewels is now another chapter in that story. Not just a tale of criminals breaking glass, but a reminder that nothing is ever completely beyond reach, that even the grandest institutions can be vulnerable, and that the cultural treasures we assume are safe still depend on fragile systems, human decisions, and imperfect structures. It is a story about ambition, about daring, about failure and exposure, and about the uncomfortable reality that sometimes history isn't stolen quietly in the night. Sometimes it is taken in daylight from a place the entire world believed could never be touched.